English translation, 306th contact. Thursday, 19th of July, 2001, 16:23 hours.
Here I am. I was still briefly with Engelbert in the printing office. Be welcomed and greeted.
Salome, my friend. I have also only been here for a minute. I come, on the one hand, to bring you some new material, so that you can prepare this for us, please. On the other hand, I would certainly also like to take from you what is finished, which should help us in regards to the teaching. I would also like to give you a response from our language scholars, as well as tell you the result in terms of my clarification in the matters of the Argonne Publishing House and Rainer Schenk.
I have worked on your questions. Consequently, you can also take the written elaboration. I will, of course, gladly work through the new material. But now, please tell me what has arisen with your linguists with respect to my question.
Your question, which you had Florina convey to me, I could only ask 2 days ago, after which I received the following answer, which I was to give to you. The German language is very well the best language of the human beings on earth, but no one understands how to use it and speak it in all its values. Quite the contrary. The language is getting ever poorer and more distorted. Mixed with the extremely unsatisfactory English language and distorted by the linguistic innovation carried out some time ago to a large extent, particularly in a written as well as oral form. An extremely unfortunate process that has very detrimental effects in many respects, not in the least in relation to understanding. Yet even in the Swiss-German language, distortions arise in the way of writing because, for example, where an open E should be written, which could be written as E with a small straight line over it, so as follows Ptah writes, A, and A is used, as for example with the word Ecke, which is written as Egge instead of as Egge. In the Swiss-German language, it is given that the open E remains as such in the written language and cannot be replaced by A. But now to your question. As Florina explained, in one of your novels, you used the phrase that a character in the novel's main character, was not underprivileged in relation to his intelligence, etc. This was objected to you by Florina and was described as inaccurate. At the same time, our writing experts and linguistic experts of the German language explained that the word choice was absolutely right and free of objection. Someone who is underprivileged means, on the one hand, for example, that a low compensation or otherwise any disadvantage of a material form is made, but on the other hand, the meaning of underprivileged is related to the intelligence of a person. That is to say, to an intelligence-related evaluation of the person, in that in the case of one who is underprivileged, a degradation of the person and his or her intelligence takes place. An underprivileged person, in the sense as you have written in your novel, means that there is an intellectual and consciousness-related devaluation, impairment, and degradation, which can also have reference to physical injuries and to abilities and so on. In a purely material form, particularly regarding finances, goods, and property, underprivileged also means poverty and low compensation, as I already explained. It also means receiving remuneration or something below the average, or having something below the average. Unfortunately, many German-speaking people presume themselves as knowledgeable in the individual values of words and meanings of the German language, and even believe that they actually master the German language to a great extent. But they understand many words incorrectly and cannot use old as well as new words and terms in the right form. Which is also quite evidently true, unfortunately, for people who do not understand your choice of words and linguistic knowledge and who are underprivileged as compared to you. Those are the explanations of our linguistic experts and writing experts of the German language. But the fact that you master the German language very well, there is absolutely no doubt, as it is also true that you have mastered many words and terms, as well as their correct interpretations more than just above average. But that should not be surprising when you consider that you learned much more through my father's Foth in your very young years than would otherwise be possible for a human of Earth. This also includes the fact that you could already read and write at the age of 6 years.
Thanks to Svath's assistance and instruction, for which I will be forever grateful to him. But just with regard to Svath's legacy, I have a question. You have now already brought me quite a lot of my earlier poems, verses, and aphorisms which Svath collected and left behind for you. He also kept my essay Progress, which I wrote at the age of 11 years in school. I mean the one that you brought me recently. By the way, I will still add it to this at the end of this contact report. The question is, do you have even more of such written things from my youth and the like?
I have not yet looked through the things my father left behind completely, but it is possible that even more things can be found.
You are good. Svath has now been gone for 48 years, and still you have not taken a close look at his things that he left behind for you.
This might seem strange to you, but for me there is no need for this. At least, there has not been a need until now, for I knew what he left behind for me. During his lifetime, he spoke about it very often, and so there was no reason to take a closer look at the things left until just at the moment when you asked if my father had left behind any records relating to you and your learning process, etc. And since my father instructed me only to search for these things in his estate if you would one day ask for them, I have just done this.
Oh, I see. So only if a need arose for it.
That is right.
How is it, then, with you when an estate arises? Here on Earth, it is very often the case that the surviving relatives get together and dispute with one another, just because of the wealth, so because of the money and the goods and property, etc.
Such a doing is foreign to us.
Of course, you have indeed no money, and you can always get all goods and property from the community without any money, just what you want. This probably prevents any envy or any resentment, etc., which means that each one has what he or she wants. This might also explain why theft is a foreign word to you, and why you have no crime in relation to this. If anyone can possess what he or she also always wants and also receives this from the community, then any theft and fraud, etc., are nipped in the bud.
You encounter the sense of the matter. But now, I would like to inform you of the result of my investigation regarding the Argonne Publishing House, that is to say Magazine 2000, and Rainer Schenk. What Michael Hesemann told you, unfortunately, corresponds to the truth and is very regrettable. It is also true that Rainer Schenk actually works at this publishing house, as I determined just today by my investigation. Moreover, it is to be said that just yesterday, on the 18th of July, he wrote a letter and took it to the post office, on which he wrote down today's date, however, so the 19th of July. The letter is addressed to Wolfgang and contains the desire that the free community of interests should enclose promotional material for the Argonne Publishing House in its shipments, etc. The South German Study Group should also be included therein. Both for this group as well as for the free community of interests in the center, this would not be an advantage, but rather a disadvantage, so my advice is that this desire should not be granted. One of my reasons for this is the Nazi air that emanates from and that is tolerated by the responsible persons of the publishing house, with whom the free community of interests can in no wise declare itself in solidarity, and which it also may not do, due to its responsibility to be represented with respect to freedom and neutrality, as well as justice, etc.
We will most certainly follow all your advice.
That will be good. But now a question. Why do you want to include your essay at the end of our conversation? For we have just talked about it. You can nevertheless include it here afterwards.
I can, of course. Your wish is my command, dear friend.
Progress.
The human beings are in the world in order to change and to evolve. This is so throughout the whole universe on all inhabited planets, always was so, and will always remain so, and indeed, as long as there are material humans in need of evolution. Evolution is also the meaning of life, and in this consequence, humans continually strive further and for something higher, in order always to strive for and achieve the relatively highest possible perfection. An urge by creation to strive for something higher and more perfect, which is fixed in humans, awakens in them the driving force of the healthy and accountable, measured and worthy ambition by which progress is taken and acquired. The way of progress has both its beautiful as well as its ugly sides. Thus, it brings, for example, successes and valuable innovations in all possible areas, such as in technology and medicine, but also with respect to all kinds of scientific insights, in any form of archaeological research, and with regard to various other things. Also, successes appear that ensure a longer life expectancy of humans than what was formerly the case, when the humans reached an average age of 28 to 42 years. Also, with regard to the hygiene of humans, progress brings a tremendous amount of value, which also contributes in part to the prolongation of life, along with new and more valuable food, medicines, and surgical as well as medical capacities, etc. The opposite of progress, however, also has its very ugly sides, and indeed especially when technical, chemical, and all sorts of scientific achievements become negatively redesigned and implemented for military purposes, or for improper profit purposes. So it will appear in the coming time through the unstoppable progress, good as well as evil and negative as well as positive. Thus, the monstrously negative and evil already occurred on the 6th of August 1945 in Hiroshima, Japan, the first use of a nuclear weapon, and a short time later in Nagasaki, Japan, the second one followed. These atomic bombings, which cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of humans, terrified all of humanity, while the Americans responsible for this fell into the flush of victory. But that is not enough, for the progress of the future will still bring many other deadly weapons, and indeed also those that will be based on deadly swinging waves and rays, which can destroy the coming electronics technology as well as all animal organic and human organic life. However, the whole environment will also be affected, and the terms environmental pollution and environmental degradation will become just as bad catchwords as also the incessantly growing overpopulation, for which the foundations are already laid, which will allow all earthly and human-produced problems to grow immeasurably. Also, spaceflight technology will be included in the progress, and already soon, this technology will also belong to everyday life. However, there will also be a mixing of peoples, which will bring hatred and death, but also disease and epidemic carryovers, which will demand very many victims. Thus, diseases and epidemics will be displaced from the southern into the northern countries, and from the northern into the southern. And especially human sexual perversions and greed for profit will play very important roles. Diseases and epidemics that are believed to be eradicated will appear anew, as well as various animal diseases whose pathogens mutate and spread to humans, and there will not just be a few of these diseases and epidemics. But still, Progress will also bring about successes that will bring tremendous benefits to very many interests of humans, particularly through genetic engineering and gene manipulation, which will be in the mouths of all humans. Yet also in surgery and medicine, successes will appear through the progress, which humans and particularly the scientists of the present time do not even dare to dream of yet. Striving for better values, for progress and success, as well as for higher things with regard to knowledge. Real love and wisdom is given to humans by creation, so that from this they develop a healthy ambition in order to ensure progress, and with it, the meaning of life. Yet humans must always be mindful of this, so that they know how to restrain and control it. If they do not learn this, however, then progress can become very dangerous for them and lead them to their own annihilation, even to the complete destruction of the planet Earth. Generally speaking, there are different forms of striving and ambition. Nevertheless, humans themselves determine each form because they have their own and free will in every respect. Accordingly, they can change it at their own discretion and exercise it as they always sees fit. However, this gives them the ability to think for better or for worse, positively or negatively, to create their feelings as well as carry out their actions. Solely the perception and exercise of one's responsibility, or even its neglect or malicious, willful, or wanton disregard, decides whether good and positive or bad and negative result. And this applies to both sexes of humans, both to the female as well as to the male. Nevertheless, the striving and ambition are different, depending on the specific gender, even though the boundaries are sometimes blurred and barely recognizable, as this will very especially be the case in the coming time, when an emancipation-driven equal rights delusion breaks out, which will sprout strange flowers. However, it will be irrevocable that the women, who have been beaten down by the male world for thousands of years, will slowly be able to free themselves from the male bondage and, thus, be able to work in the areas of the male domain and indeed particularly in professional interests. If one observes man and woman, then one cannot help but notice that the thoughts and feelings of the woman are more oriented to what is useful and meaningful, as well as to the facts and objectivity. And with this, she is also more pragmatically oriented than what is the case with the man. While the man always wants to conquer the whole world, indulges in visions, and is very strongly attached to the material. Instead of minding the dirt in front of his own door, he looks at the filth of his neighbor, gladly interferes in foreign affairs, believes that he is great and strong, and acts at every opportunity, all the same whether appropriately or inappropriately, as though he would be the Lord of the world and omniscient. Conflict and war are often appropriate for him, and the consequences arising from it are very often just as foreign to him, like when he actually seizes the power for himself without hesitation, exercises it with evil force, and thereby sows death and destruction, and indeed very often not only in relation to his country, or rather his nation, province, or city, but also in his own family. In contrast, there is the woman who is much more pragmatically oriented and, therefore, first of all wants to change the world around herself, whereby her own family and immediate surroundings come first. For everything there should be good, harmonious, and prosperous, as well as peaceful, and without great worries and problems. This is also the reason why she tackles and exercises everything very practically and straightforwardly, in stark contrast to the man who often displays a disgraceful complexity and a great lack of understanding in these things, and indeed without leading any great speeches. Still, women must fight for their equal rights, which will still be the case until some time in the future. And indeed, even though they have found access to the male world of employment since the 19th century, and this will increasingly be the case in the coming time. However, this will resolve itself with time, because the events at the present time are also at a breakneck change, as well as all of the events that will follow from the future and shape a whole new world view. But overall, this change means that there will be a tremendous upheaval that will throw the old world order completely onto the heap. All of the coming progress will be so immense and will come so quickly that many humans will not be able to keep up with it. Thus, the human being must change himself or herself if they reasonably want to overcome everything and without all too great collisions. Change must come quickly, however, because time and progress do not stand still. Each individual must take all their concerns into hand and bring them to good progress and success. If they do not do this, however, then they will remain in their old person and will continue to muddle along in the rut in which they have gone until now. Thus, the only ones who will profit from the progress and success are those who move along with the times and the progress and who do not simply walk along the same lousy and unprogressive path before them, as they have done up to now. And this also has reference to one's life attitude and lifestyle with regard to real love, true knowledge and wisdom, as well as to one's own peace, harmony, and freedom. The human can, in fact, develop a healthy ambition from their creation-given striving, whereby they can change themselves to the better person. Every individual must do this, and if they do, then they can thereby also change other humans indirectly, namely by living as a good and positive example which is accepted by the others, for they find it as good in order, then, to exercise it themselves and induce a similar change in themselves. It may be a close associate or a foreign person. It absolutely does not matter, because it is only important that one's own creations and one's good and positive living example produce their effects within their own framework and are, thus, also transferred to one's fellow humans, from which new fruits emerge. Indeed, the fact is that every person can influence their nearer and further surroundings a lot more than what they themselves are aware of. But one must be clear about this.
If one wants to see humanity change, then one must begin with the change in himself or herself.
Schoolhouse B. Bulak, ZH, Tuesday, 3rd February 1948, 15:16 hours. Edward, 11 years old. Corrections, Teacher Gustav Lehmann.
I do not command you.
Of course not. It is just an expression. But you know, I still remember that birthday of mine very well, when I was allowed to write the essay. Teacher Lehman told me in the morning, when I wedged myself into my school desk, that that day was a special day for me, even my birthday, so he wanted to exempt me from the fixed timetable of subjects, such as arithmetic, singing, gym, and dictation, etc. But for this, I could write an essay, namely at my own discretion, and for which I could take the whole day, so all compulsory school hours. Since I had just spoken with Svath in detail at that time about the future and progress, and, in this connection, had a lot to learn in its order, I just chose the topic of progress. So then, my essay arose from it, which I am now going to use as an Wassermannsite Aquarian Age article. Teacher Lehman was so enthusiastic about my essay that he handed it from teacher to teacher, who were surprised, to say the least, that an 11-year-old should have written such an essay.
That is well known to me because my father told me the whole story.
I should have guessed that. But tell me, you recently explained to me that Earth petroleum, that is to say, Earth oil, not only originated from bacterial deposits of moorlands, etc., but that even a process belonging to the Earth takes place, through which new oil is constantly created. If I remember correctly, you explained that through the Earth's interior processes, new petroleum constantly emerges, whereby both the Earth's heat as well as the Earth's internal pressure in various deep layers of the Earth produce chemical changes, forming constantly new oil. In addition, you called this internal pressure of the Earth depth pressure. And moreover, you said that the currently known stock of petroleum could be used for 40 to 50 years, based on the current consumption by Earth humanity.
That is right, but I cannot give you any other official explanations about that. But is this what you wanted to ask for?
That was actually my intention, yes. Now let us leave that. Then another question. In 1989, when the contacts were officially resumed, you spoke of the fact that in the GDR the death penalty was perfectly acceptable and that in fact many death sentences were carried out. The question now is whether I am now no longer bound to silence in this connection and therefore may talk about it.
There is no longer a reason why you would have to remain silent.
Then I would briefly like to repeat what I still know. If something is not right, then correct me, please. At that time, you said that the fact of the death sentences and their enforcement had been concealed, and to be sure, even from the citizens of the GDR. The method of execution was such that a short rope with a noose was placed around the neck of one condemned to death, after which the poor devil was then hung from the rope on a large meat hook and was miserably strangled in this way. Then later, distance had been taken from this method of execution, but just to execute one condemned to death with a pistol shot to the head, namely in a small bare room specially chosen for the purpose. In particular, death sentences were pronounced and carried out due to alleged nation-endangering machinations, but also for minor reasons.
As usual, your memory does not let you down.
Can you perhaps give me a number in regards to how many human beings were murdered throughout the whole time of the GDR through the implementation of the death penalty?
That is well known to us. In all, 1,084 human beings were executed, but this, as you explained, was concealed.
But I take it that there would have to be court records and the like, right?
Such documents do actually still exist. However, the records are only very scarce because the largest part has been destroyed.
I actually could have imagined that myself. Then to another question. Already for many years, books and assertions have been circulating with regard to the notion that food is determined for humans according to blood type. That those of certain blood types would, therefore, have to eat food that is coordinated to their blood type and so on, if they want to remain truly healthy and naturally live. Is this true?
The assertion that food is to be determined for a person according to their blood type is not only wrong but ridiculous. Because each person is basically an omnivore who can actually utilize all healthy and non-toxic foods. Moreover, all health-sustaining food is equally valuable and suitable for every blood type. Consequently, with regard to food, there is no difference for certain blood types. Nevertheless, it is to be noted that each person, regardless of their blood type, is different in regards to the usability of and compatibility with food. This can be determined both by genes as well as by illnesses, and in particular, allergies have a major influence. Metabolism and catabolism are also of great importance. For also in this connection, differences arise from person to person, but which, in these forms, also have nothing to do with the blood type of the individual. Thus, also in this regard, reactions are different from one person to another. Even though other differences also appear with the foods of various peoples and races, this has nothing to do with the blood types, but solely with the foods that thrive in the various countries, etc., and that are used by the humans. In your linguistic usage, you have a suitable saying that can be attached to this. Other countries, other customs and practices, other peoples and races, other foods, meals, and beverages.
So it is utter nonsense what is said about blood type-specific foods. Even male doctors concern themselves with this matter and affirm that certain blood types require particular foods.
On the one hand, that is based on delusional ideas, and on the other hand, on the desire for profit.
That is surely so. When I think of all the books that are written in favor of this nonsense, and by which vast amounts of money are earned. The money and the image are very well the most crucial points of the matter.
That is certainly so.
Another question. In AD 535, so in the 6th century, the earth was wrapped in a smoke or dust veil for many months, through which the sun was only faintly visible. Do you know what it was at that time?
At that time, the Earth was wrapped in a veil of dust particles for 18 months, through which the sun was, indeed, only seen faintly. The event, which brought about worldwide impacts in terms of a climate change, was triggered by a gigantic eruption of the volcano Rakata, which is known to you as Krakatoa or Krakatau.
Ah, yes, this volcano exploded in 1883, whereby more than 1/2 the island sank into the sea. Through this, there were about 40,000 deaths. Wait a minute, please. Here's the encyclopedia. Ah, here it's written, Krakatau, Krakatoa, Rakata, volcano. Island in the Sunda Strait, Indonesia, between Sumatra and Java, 15 km 830 meter high. Forms, with 2 other islands, the remainders of a former 2,000-meter high volcano, which exploded in 1883. The ejected volcanic ash rose 50 to 80 kilometers in height, spread out over all the Earth, and caused a twilight phenomena in the atmosphere that was still perceptible 3 years later. With the collapse of the caldera, an over 20-meter high tidal wave formed during this eruption, which devastated the coasts of West Java and southeast Sumatra. 36,000 deaths.
The information is correct so far, but not concerning the number of deaths that the catastrophe claimed. According to our very accurate records, the total number amounts to 57,804 people who were killed by the direct volcanic eruption as well as by the colossal tidal wave. Moreover, the tidal wave had quite devastating effects on the islands of Sumatra and Java, which were far worse than indicated by this encyclopedia note. The volcano Rakata, or Krakatau, exhibits an undersea activity, which was minimal for a long time, but, since the year 1928, has become quite active again.
Old records speak of the fact that in the year AD 535, the sun was only seen for a long time as through a veil. You said 18 months. But here in the encyclopedia, it says that after 1883, a twilight effect was still noticeable 3 years later. Was this eruption stronger than that of AD 535?
No, the eruption in the 6th century was more powerful. Consequently, the twilight effects first finally disappeared after 5 years. For 18 months, however, the twilight was very strong, and indeed the sun could only be seen through a thick veil of dust. At that time, the height of the volcano measured 3,171 meters, of which about half was thrown off by the eruption. Also at that time, there was a colossal tidal wave that reached just over 30 meters high and raced with tremendous speed across the sea, devastated several islands, and caused 3 of these sink beneath the floods. The volcanic island itself was also much larger at that time.
Interesting. Then I have got another question. How does it actually stand with the transportation gate? Have you still not progressed since? I mean the gate through which things can be transferred from one place to another.
For quite some time, we have called this technology transfer transmitter. Yes, we have made progress, and indeed in such a manner that the test objects now actually arrive at their destination. Nevertheless, there is still some ambiguity to be mastered, and there are safety factors to consider before this technology is advanced to the extent that humans can use the transfer transmitter, guaranteed without harm.
Nice. And what about Mozart's grave? When will we quickly zoom there?
It will be in the coming weeks.
Then a question about the Talmud. The term Talmud, as Svath already taught me, comes from the ancient Lyran language and actually means case, trunk. So for the Talmud Emmanuel, the meaning case of Emmanuel arises. Then, in accordance with the ancient Lyran language, it can be interpreted that the case contains Emmanuel's teaching. Is this right as such?
That corresponds to the truth.
So then, this title must also be retained for the book and may not be replaced by the teachings of Emmanuel?
Of course, but you know this. Why do you ask, then?
White Flower, publishers in America, wanted a new title for the book's reprint. I explained that this may not be done.
The title Talmud Emmanuel must be retained. Another title would be a falsification.
Okay, done. Now, I would like to ask about what technology and energy source you actually use for your intergalactic and planetary communication. As I know, your technology is aligned such that there is no loss of time during communication, not even when this is carried out across millions and billions of light years. Can you explain something about this to me, or is it all a secret?
We use the technology of negative speed, through which a signal is already manifested at the destination through corresponding communication devices before the actual transmission or sending of the signal has even begun. Thus, the signal already reaches the goal upon input of the signal. The sending distance is unlimited and therefore extends throughout the whole universe. The energy sources, for which you ask, are actual signal carriers by which everything is linked together throughout the whole universe and through which the cosmic communication of all things, all life, and all existence takes place. These energy sources are not detectable and are not at all usable without suitable and high-precision auxiliary apparatuses. For the human eye, they are completely invisible, and they have the capacity to penetrate any matter irresistibly, and when I say any matter, I mean it. For no matter or antimatter exists throughout the whole universe that could not be penetrated by these energy sources that travel billions of times faster than the speed of light with unimpeded speed. These faster-than-light energy sources are subneutrinos. Our technology allows us to equip these with signals, which also happens with billions of times the speed of light and has the effect that the signals spread like lightning throughout the whole universe and indeed indefinitely in all directions. In order, then, to catch the signals, special and highly sensitive sensors are necessary through which the signals are then transmitted to an equalizer and deciphered.
Our science knows about neutrinos, however.
That is right, but I am not speaking of the neutrinos that are known to the earthly scientists, but of subneutrinos, concerning which the scientists of the Earth do not know that they exist. Also, they will discover these not long from now.
What do you mean by not long? 50 years or 100 years?
I speak of several thousand years.
Man, oh man, your concept of time. But now I have got a question about beaming. At what distance is this possible for you?
The distance amounts to 3 light seconds.
Bang. That is, yes, one moment. Yes, that is indeed about 900,000 kilometers. Just a moment. 8,989,377.374 kilometers, as my auxiliary brain says here.
That is right.
Do you still have time for a question?
Certainly.
So, do your personal protective shields function like the ship's protective shields? I mean such that the protective shields automatically strengthen when any energies or materials collide with them? And what about physical projectiles? Do they become deflected or dissolved, or are they also converted into shield-strengthening energy?
You gave the answer yourself. The personal protective shields function likewise as the protective shields of our aircraft. Any energy hitting them is converted and reinforces the shields, through which they become absolutely impenetrable and indestructible. Also, any matter hitting the protective shields, including firearm bullets, etc., immediately turn into pure energy, which the protective shield takes in and absorbs, strengthening it. Larger objects, such as large meteors or comets, on the other hand, are only partially dissolved into energy, while the largest part is hurled away by the impact on the protective shield.
2 decades ago, however, you still had a so-called diversion or deflection technology, right?
That is only partially correct. For even at the beginning of your contacts with us, we had the aforementioned technology. It is just that it was then still new and was not installed in all of our aircraft.
Oh, I see. Then I have now actually asked all questions that I had in stock. So I would just like to tell you that the arbor in front of the storage place is now finally being tackled by Wolfgang.
That pleases me. May I ask again to be allowed to be the first to spend a peaceful minute there?
Of course, that is no problem.
Then I would like to thank you for it. And now until we meet again, my friend. I will not keep you waiting long for me. Farewell, Edward.
Take care in Salome.